morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're just going to give it a moment for everybody to join in who's in our waiting room today. We appreciate you being with us on this Friday. I hope wherever you are, it's sunny and warm. I know yesterday was very cold where I was. Again, good morning, everyone. For those of you joining on the call, we're going to go ahead and get started in just a moment here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. All right, so it does look like the waiting room is cleared out at this time. So we're going to go ahead and get started and just do some quick introductions here and what we're going to be talking about today. So today our Career Champions training is on building transferable skills, helping students to be successful post-graduation. I did want to mention that today's training is recorded, so you will be provided with a link via email after the presentation. And that way you can view it at any time in your leisure or get any links that we have included within our presentation. If you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature, and I will be monitoring that throughout. And we will also have a Q&A at the end of that time. All right, so I'm going to do some quick introductions with myself. I'm Kaitlyn Anderson. I am the Career Readiness Program Designer for the Center for Career Development. So within my role, I design and develop career readiness programs and resources for both faculty and staff to integrate into courses, advising, student employment, and just general conversations with students. So I know, Allison, you were having some audio issues before. Are you ready?
I think I am.
You are. I can hear you. That's great. Go ahead. You can go ahead and introduce yourself, your role, your company, and any affiliations that you have with UConn.
Sure. So hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining. My name is Allison Eastwood. I am a senior recruiter for Cigna's Early Career and Actuarial Development Program. I've spent, I'll hit 16 years sometime this month being with Cigna. Also, that means spending about 16 years in the early career university recruiting space. I recently just finished my master's at the University of Connecticut, May 2022, with a master's of human resource management. So great to be here. I love recruiting students. I've been connected to the University of Connecticut, oh my gosh, pretty much since I started recruiting for Cigna. So I'm definitely proud to be an alum now, and again, continue the relationship to recruit students from this university. Love being on campus, and again, connecting with students all the time from no matter what campus they belong to in the state of Connecticut. 100% support the Huskies.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Allison, for being here today. We also have with us Bernard Alexander. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment to introduce yourself, your role, the company that you work for, and any affiliations that you have with UConn.
Yes, thank you, Kaitlyn, and thank you for having me. My name is Bernard Alexander. I'm also a recruiter. I am the campus recruiter for Teach for America at UConn, as well as Yale. My connections to UConn, I am not an alum, but I also did Teach for America, and I taught in Hartford from 2019 for 2 years, and this will be my second year recruiting at UConn. So just the teaching experience and moving to Connecticut has really made me interested in helping Connecticut students hopefully become a teacher in Connecticut, and if not, wherever they want to be. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, Bernard. And we also have Natalia Smirnova with us today. Natalia, if you would take a moment, introduce yourself, your role, and your affiliation with UConn.
Yes, hi everyone. I am an associate professor in residence at the Department of Economics in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences here. So I'm also alumna of UConn. I had my PhD here in 2004. And so then I worked in the industry, and now I came back as you see, as in residence faculty. So I basically in resident faculty at the university just teach many courses and many students, and we are kind of focused on building their success in the career, I hope. And so I am happy to share with you today different strategies that I use to get our students prepared for the future careers.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so on the agenda for today, our learning objectives that we are hoping that you take away from this presentation is that you're going to be able to articulate the importance of embedding career competencies and career development into every facet of students' collegiate experience, and that you'll also be able to strategize ways to develop students' awareness of these competencies and help them to align these skills through the tasks and behaviors that they are exhibiting in all of their different roles as a student on campus, from student employment to advisors to within organizations and clubs, athletics, within the classroom experience as well. So very multifaceted. So I know that there are many staff and faculty on the call today. So just thinking about ways that you can highlight and elevate what students are currently doing within these many different roles. So I'm going to start off just bringing everybody up to speed with what NACE competencies are. Some of you are very aware with them and already elevating them in your students' experiences, whether it be classroom, student life, student employment, so on and so forth. But I also really wanted to talk about the difference between a transferable skill and what it is to be a competency. So your transferable skills are those that you're taking with you from role to role, job to job, just one experience to the next, whether you're in an office setting and then going to a classroom, then from a classroom, you're a member within a club. All of those have different transferable skills that you can link to each other. And they don't have to be content specific. When you are talking about content specific, sometimes you're getting more into your technical skills, whether it's computer programming, coding, welding, a language proficiency, all of those being measurable and quantifiable. But then we also have your soft skills, which are like your non-technical, which do lend themselves a bit more to competencies than technical skills do. But I like to think about competencies as more of the overarching umbrella term that can include both soft skills and hard skills, or those technical skills that you're looking for. So they are kind of more of that holistic skill that we're looking for, whether it be problem solving, teamwork, strong communication. So NACE has this defined 8 specific ones, which we call becoming career ready. If you are developing these skills, you are becoming career ready as a future employee to whether it be Bernard or Allison or any other company or job role that you're looking to secure. These 8 competencies have been identified as important to employers through extensive research and observations that were conducted by NACE, which is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And they have deemed these skills necessary for success in today's workforce and other post-collegiate pursuits. So here is a diagram that outlines the 8 different competencies that NACE and other industry employers have identified as being those important skills that students are taking away. And I really like to think about these skills as when students ask the question of, when am I ever going to use this? If those were especially back in high school, I was a high school teacher for 12 years. It's all of those skills that are going to help you persevere and problem solve and adapt to the different tasks that you're going to be given throughout your lifetime. NACE does also provide sample behaviors with each one of these, and that resource can be found at the end of this presentation. So just a quick overview of the competencies. We have career and self-development, which I like to call becoming a lifelong learner. You have your communication, which I almost see in every single job description that I read. Critical thinking, just creating a presentation like this takes critical thinking skills. We have equity inclusion, making sure that we are looking at every broad spectrum of student that we are working with on campus and all of the different roles that they are going to be playing a part of. We have leadership experience, which we offer, throughout many different parts of a student's life. We have professionalism, teamwork, and technology to round out those 8. So technology is one of those big ones. I mean, think about the call that we're on now. This wasn't happening 10 years ago. So technology has blossomed tremendously over time, but also making students are using it effectively and efficiently. So before we get to Bernard and Allison really talking about their viewpoints on those 8, I first wanted to mention, what is the Career Center doing? So although our office is available to any student, not all students are going to utilize our services found in-house. I also want to mention that we do have Career Center services and staff available on our regional campuses as well. But for a multitude of reasons, they're not going to be utilizing our services in-house. And that's because career inequity exists throughout our campus, and we need to help break down those systematic and organizational structures that do perpetuate such attitudes. Not everyone has equal access to social capital and professional networks as defined by Suffolk University. So therefore, faculty and staff alike, you guys are going to have the most interaction with students. So because you're in front of them almost every single day, this is going to create the greatest chance for career development and equitable access to being career ready. So there are some examples that are predictors of career inequity that we need to make sure that we highlight. So lack of college and career planning resources prior to coming to campus, not having a family member to turn to talk to advice about college and career. So thinking about our first generation students, and not having access to certain types of events or resources or experiential learning opportunities as well. So, that could be from, the lack of experiential learning options could be from work authorization status or just non-academic factors that might influence it. So we're trying to make sure that we are hitting these 3 global points within our Career Center. So ensuring that students have the tools and resources needed for post-graduation success, integrate career development into every facet of a student's UConn experience, and then through that intentional infusing of career development into the UConn experience, our Career Everywhere team can provide access and equity to career development for all students, including underrepresented and marginalized populations. So just thinking about this diagram here, I thought that this was extremely impactful, and I was actually just at a virtual symposium held by NACE that really talked about this diagram here. And what it's showing is it is what recruiters are looking for in terms of GPA. And if you look back at 2018, 2019, which was only 4 or 5 years ago, 73.3% of recruiters did say that they were scanning candidates by GPA. Now, fast forward to 5 years later, it's now down to 37%, say that the GPA is influencing their decision when looking at a candidate's resume. So I think that is extremely impactful in terms of a shift of focus from a content-based approach to a skills-based approach. And that means that students are now needing to market themselves in that regard in order to have that competitive edge. So I'm going to start to turn it over to Allison and Bernard with a little bit more pinpointed questions here, and just thinking about those 8 career competencies first. So I'm going to start with Allison. Which one do you find to be the most important?
Well, to be honest, that's a really hard question, but they're all important, to be honest, because Cigna, so when I hear the word competencies, and a couple of years ago when I first heard NACE working on this, and the reason I heard it is because Cigna and myself and the rest of my team, we are members of NACE. And my manager was actually one of the people representing corporations or companies to be on the project team with NACE. So hand in hand with people like yourself, colleges and universities, my manager was one of the leaders working to help develop these competencies. And when I hear the word competency, I think about Cigna's 38 competencies. We have 38 competencies that, we've identified them to help really think about the behaviors that we think about for success for employees, right? Whether that's in the work people do to develop in career growth. So my team took these NACE career competencies, and because there are 8 of them, we actually looked at remember I said we have 38? So we actually kind of mirrored them, but we did a crosswalk. So when I take these eight competencies from NACE, I look at Cigna's competencies, and when we create our job descriptions, when we speak to students, we're really mirroring what NACE is saying, because we're doing the crosswalk on the back end so it connects to Cigna's competencies, because to be honest, all of these fit into several of our 38 competencies. So they're all important for many different reasons, depending on the job and what we need for success. But they all fit into Cigna's 38 competencies in different ways. So to me, they're all important because we definitely want people that can work, well as a team. We want, we want to hire people that want to develop themselves and, continue in their career path here. Communication, key skill. And like, not only do you see it in a job description, but communicating through your resume, then communicating on that first interview with a recruiter, and then communicating all your skills, competencies, abilities, and experiences through that final round interview. So, I could keep going, but I will let Bernard speak, but these are all important because they do kind of reflect back, like I said, to the crosswalk of the competencies we use at Cigna.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison. Bernard, I saw you shaking your head a lot on that communication one. You can either feel free to expand, or again, I'll ask the question of which one are you finding as the most important competency?
Yeah, I'll definitely add my opinion, and I'll expand upon that. Allison said a lot of great things. First, I think personally it's hard to say which one is most important, just because I think they're all important. But for Teach for America specifically, I know something we've always pushed ourselves as is more so towards leadership development specifically. So I would say for us, leadership is number one, with equity and inclusion and communication close seconds. And the thing about leadership, what I'm finding difficult with students now is, and to your earlier point, Kaitlyn, about hard skills and soft skills. Speaking of leadership in a hard skills lens, it's harder to see that in students, especially because of COVID. What I'll realize is in my conversation with students, you'll talk to them, you find out their experience outside of academics. And, maybe there'll be a president of this org or a secretary here or some kind of, leadership position. And, I start to ask deeper, right? Like, what were your roles? What did you do? And a lot of times it was impacted by COVID, right? They're like, well, honestly, it was hard to drum up attendance, or we didn't really have a lot of in-person time. So you see a lot of experiences like that. So I think as an employer, I start to want to push like, all right, well, as a student, when you get in a role, make sure you're able to quantify what it is you're about to do and what your tasks are going to be, and make sure it's actually meaningful. I think it's important for students to find meaningful leadership experiences, as well as what you said, right? GPA is not something that we are highly regarding as much as we used to. And that's because the formative experiences also include extracurriculars. They also include a job you worked outside of. So I know students have a lot to handle, especially now, but finding meaningful leadership, I think, for Teach for America is super important.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. All right. So I do want to show this diagram here that does outline something specifically to both Allison and Bernard as recruiters. So when NACE was doing their research, they did have a poll on importance of career readiness competencies versus proficiency in those new hires. So the darker blue, almost black looking bar represents the importance of that career readiness skill as deemed by recruiters, or I should just say employers in general. The lighter blue is what they found was the actual proficiency level on that 4 to 5. So like actually ranking new hires as being proficient within that competency. So for instance, in communication, 95.6% of employers found that competency to be of great importance. I believe it was very important or extremely important, versus the lighter blue was what employers found their new hires to be proficient in, either very proficient or extremely proficient. So what we can see is, based off of this research, is that there is a gap between what is deemed important versus where new hires are actually finding themselves. So if I'll start with Bernard this time. If you wouldn't mind just speaking to this, is there a gap that you're seeing between what you guys are finding important versus where students really actually are at post-graduation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's a continuation of my point with the leadership thing. It's the first thing I saw here, right, was how low the actual proficiency of leadership is. And I really do think COVID has had that effect of a lag in experiences, and it's made it hard. Communication as well. I'm finding students, either communication is not prompt or timely, or it's difficult for them to kind of convey the experiences. That's something I find often because I do a lot of one-on-one meetings with students, especially on campus. And what I find is they might have the experience, but I kind of gotta draw it out of them. I have to ask them questions. I have to lead them places. So I find like, yes, you might have the experience, but can you communicate and explain it well? And I think that goes to just the point of this, right? Transferable skills. So how do you explain your skills in a different way, which is 100% just communication?
Great, thank you so much. Allison, same question for you. Are you seeing a gap between any of these?
Definitely echoing a lot of what Bernard said, definitely within communication for sure. I mean, there's, whether it's a gap in just knowing what to communicate or how to communicate. And I feel like I'm often sharing with, whether it's a forum like this or in front of students, in front of new hires, really discussing all different aspects of communication and how it is kind of the key to success. Because if you're not communicating even to the recruiter that you're not interested in the opportunity, or you're not communicating to your manager something, or you are getting your new job and you don't understand, whether it's an intern or a full-time person, communication, no matter what format, is so key. And there's a big gap. That's one thing I do hear from managers, that is there anything, sometimes we're asked, is there any workshops you can do with the interns, or can you provide this feedback to the university, or just call the university last week and talk to them about the lack of student response on a communication. And in the end, it was like, we don't care that they're not interested, but just getting back to people. Again, communication is key, because I feel like it's the basis for a lot of these other things, like teamwork, being professional, your self-development and your career development, like leading. You have to communicate well to lead. So all these other competencies, that communication, how critical of a skill that is.
Absolutely, yes. One thing that I've always seen when working with these is how intertwined they actually become. They aren't very separate competencies. There's definitely parts of those softer skills that mold themselves into all. I think you could probably link all of them together. So I definitely appreciate that point of view on it as well. So I do have 3 questions here that I want to run through with the both of you before we go over to Natalia and get the faculty perspective on, what can we do to help promote these. So I think that we have already hit a little bit on, why are these competencies important in the hiring process? But I want to make sure that we haven't missed out on anything. So Allison, while you're going through that recruiting process and your hiring process, why are these so important for students to be able to showcase?
Sure. So I shared at first that Cigna has 38 competencies. So we've identified them as important competencies that help support the expectations Cigna has. So our managers, our leaders, these expectations that help enable performance and personal development and career growth of our employees. So these competencies, and then translate them to the NACE competencies, we see them as important within the jobs and the roles here at Cigna. So for us, it's important when we're interviewing that when we ask our behavioral interview questions that are all linked to the competencies. They hint out there if you're working with a student. Our behavioral interview questions are literally linked to all of our competencies. So if you can answer a behavioral interview question really well, you're helping us understand, if your level of knowledge, understanding that you can articulate yourself related to the competency that we have connected to a certain skill or role. So that's why it's really important. And that's just from the recruiter's interview. So I might, in my brief 20, 30-minute first round, I might be asking 1 or 2 behavioral interview questions that are connected to a competency. I know at the final round interview stage, those managers, not only do they have some role specific questions they're going to ask, but they have behavioral interview questions too. So the student being able to articulate themselves related to these competencies is very important in the hiring process in my company. And I don't want to speak for Bernard, but I do know a lot of other companies too have competencies. So it's very important.
Awesome. Yes. So thank you. And you also, started to hit on that second question, because I think that those are very intertwined with each other as well. So Bernard, when you're going through your recruiting and your hiring process as well, why are these competencies over, I want to hit back on the content-based things, the GPA part as well. Why are the competencies so important in terms of future success for students within your company?
Yeah, no, I love this question. I think first, the competencies, especially these 8, are like the perfect mix of what you need to succeed. So I think they're all super important as far as a baseline. And to your point, right, about the GPAs and going away from academics, I know especially with Teach for America, we're accepting of all majors, right? So GPA is important, but it's not as important as those, like I mentioned earlier, those formative experiences. So the ability to kind of show that you are competent, competencies through your experiences and not just academics or doing research with a professor, which are good stuff, but it's more, we want, especially being a teacher, we want more of that real life experience, you showing that you can do these hard and soft skills, I think are super important.
Great. Thank you so much. So both of you already touched on that blue one, how does the student's ability to articulate these. Really, we're looking, for almost like storytelling that you can expand upon your resume. Bernard, and I know that when I had met with you, you had talked about, being able to tell your story. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, definitely. In my role with Teach for America specifically, I am support through the whole process, right? So interview prep is something I've been doing these past 2 years, and I find that to be students' difficulty. And I always tell them, like, have a Rolodex of stories, right? You are going to be asked things, typical in any interview, right? Like your greatest challenges, how you overcame things, kind of these things we're used to in interviews. And now I see it's so important to have a narrative, right? These companies, Teach for America included, want you to be able, go back to the communication, to be able to tell your tale, right? And show, make the connection, right? And again, we're talking transferable skills. So show me the connection from your story to how that skill would play in our company, right? So it's really about having stories that can be applicable to the questions you're going to be asked. So I think storytelling is super important.
Awesome. That kind of actually reminds me of, high school, graduating, applying for colleges and having to, do your personal statement, your personal story, that narrative that you might have had to write in English class. But I mean, it totally is applicable to what you're talking about of taking those roles and making sure that they're going to be able to transfer over, through a cover letter, is where I see that happening of, I did this, therefore this is going to help me in this coming, role that I'm applying for. All right, so Allison, how do you feel that we can help, being the Center for Career Development, help these stakeholders support students? What more can we be doing to help these issues that you might be seeing, these gaps that are occurring?
Sure. So I think the opportunities, providing opportunities, whether it's in your classroom or, helping students have those opportunities to tell their story, because I agree. I was actually on campus last week in Kelly Kennedy's business class, talking to students, and we did something related to storytelling, and we talked about this. And when sitting in this classroom, there's about 120 students in each class, and some of them were so nervous to be on the hot seat, but having the opportunity to practice to speak in front of their peers and just get it out. So whether, they might be more comfortable in small groups. I know because being in that classroom with all these students was real intimidating for some, but the opportunity to learn how to articulate and tell their story, to speak out loud about what the project is they're working on, the presentation skills, just being in your classroom last week for 2 different classes and listening and watching the students, I think those opportunities that are so special when they're given that chance to practice and having the understanding of why it's important. So taking the work and what they're working on in class and maybe, connecting it to some professional opportunity, the outside world, and then how can they articulate this project that they just worked on? Like, how can we just worked on this unit on X, Y, and Z. How would you tell an employer about what you learned or what your whole team, you just accomplished, you just all got an A? How can you articulate that working together, the teamwork to get to that A? Or, we just spent, we had to get through it through spring break or whatever it is, like telling that story, the stress, the good and the bad, all those different things, but giving them those opportunities in the classroom to understand what they can take away to share externally. And real quick on the GPA, because I didn't even bring up one thing, it is a bullet point, right, in someone's experience about everything, about their awesomeness. And I think it's my job as a recruiter sometimes to tell our hiring team how GPA is just that. It is one bit of the bigger picture. So we still work on that because, again, the storytelling about their experiences and their skills is most important. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. Bernard, how are you feeling with, what we can do within campus to help to highlight these competencies? Like how else can we support these students in that storytelling process? Or you had mentioned before, leadership is a really big one that you're looking for. How can we help support students in developing those?
Yeah, well, first I want to echo everything Allison said. I think practice and reps are amazing. I can definitely tell easily in a conversation with a student when a student is a great conversationalist, and you can tell they've been in this setting and, they hold themselves like that. I would say the best thing you can do is probably lean into mentorship. I think mentorship is so important because a lot of these kids are telling me, like, you'd definitely be surprised how many kids I ask, like, do you have mentors or somebody on campus, especially for letters of recommendations that you feel you could go to, and the answer is almost always no. Of course, you have a good amount of students who do research and might have that research relationship with a professor, but it's not a true mentorship. So I think would give them the reps to have a kind of professional relationship. So when they do get to this point, they'll know how to have good professional relationships. But also just the ability to have a professor or a professor or a faculty, staff member, et cetera, who they can rely on, kind of talk through to advice. Because as a recruiter, as much as I help and support, for the most part, I'm a stranger, which I definitely understand. And I try to make myself as warm as possible. But at the end of the day, you are the people that they have seen for 3-4 years, however long they've been on campus. So just leaning into providing them with mentorship, networking opportunities, any way you can do, anything you can do to support their professional growth as faculty, I think, it means the world.
Great.
Can I
Awesome.
just add real quick? So Bernard, you just said something that I hear all the time as a recruiter. These students, they listen to all of you, and maybe sometimes they're in your classroom and you're like, they're not listening, they don't care what I have to say, they're sleeping. I hear so many times, my professor told me this, I got this information from the classroom, like what students I speak to, I will say that they listen, they're tuned in. So really they rely on you for a lot of different insights on things. So all that support, even more than you're giving, however you can turn that into an opportunity for that external career opportunity, I think they will listen, even though it might not look that way sometimes.
Yeah. Natalia's up there saying yes. I feel like they're not listening, but yes, their ears are open to it. So thank you very much, Allison and Bernard, for answering those questions. So we are going to do a Q&A session in a couple of minutes, so if you wouldn't mind hanging on. But I do want to switch gears over to Natalia to kind of give our faculty perspective. Natalia and I have been working closely this past semester on career development within the classroom. That articulation, that's the big piece that we've been working with other faculty members on. So I want Natalia to go ahead and share some perspectives on what you have been working on.
Well, okay, thank you very much. And also I am listening to Allison and Bernard, and I'm like, yes, we're doing this, but also exactly, I feel that they're not listening. But also there is data from NACE, I think, that when they, or whatever, surveyed 10 years after graduation, and they're saying that they went to faculty and listened and received faculty advice, and they followed that 65% of the time. Like, so the faculty is kind of the main contact person, or the first person that they kind of will be listening to for the career advice. And so anyway, so what I started doing, I just want to help them. So, and I started doing very small things that I'm already doing in my classroom. So like first thing, we're talking awareness. So, in my syllabi, I am now actually articulating for them that, okay, she's going to go to my syllabi, but we are doing what Allison was saying, we are doing a presentation or a team project, right? And so now, so go down, Kaitlyn. So now, see here, I'm going to tell them that in these projects, we are going to have this career self-development, communication, critical thinking, all these skills I am articulating for them, okay, in my syllabi. But of course, they might not read the syllabus, okay. So the second kind of thing I started doing now is that now when they do a project, with description of the project, direction of the project, I go to assignment, Kaitlyn. So then I will put there in the assignment that this assignment is doing, teamwork, because it's a group project. Or this assignment also teaching you presentation skills, right? Like, for example, blah, 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 see here, and critical thinking, communication, and professionalism. And again, I start putting the links to then they can read if they, but I hope these are small things, but also, I'm already I have this assignment done, so I'm just going to add these competencies there for them to think about it, maybe, right? So they would kind of remember those. So in terms of, because I know faculty is on this call, so just small things, but just again, listen, three more sentences or 3 more words to type on my project description, and no big deal. But it seems like research is showing that it's kind of stuck. Then okay, so there was some critical thinking. Okay, good. So then I hope when they do interview for Allison or Bernard or other people, they will be able, when you say, okay, give me an example of critical thinking competency, or like, what did you do? What's communication did you ever do? So then they can say, oh yes, I did this assignment, policy recommendation and economics. So that's where I'm going to. And so it's just kind of telling them more about what they're doing, not only in the content piece, because I'm grading, of course, the content, but kind of keep articulating, keep telling them that that's what they're developing, not only the content about monetary policy, but also the communication skill, the teamwork. So, okay. And also, just to not take too much time, so I also started to doing exactly what Bernard and Allison especially were suggesting, both of you. I also invite some alumni, some my former students, some also I'm working with the Career Center, with Alumni Relations Office. And when, as a faculty, you start doing that, then they're there to help, our career office and alumni, because they need to get our connection to alumni people. So then, okay, so please click there. So I have but now through the years, now it's my 5th year at UConn. So, and scroll, see, like I have this hosting business leaders. When I now start putting it in my little web page, now I'm like, oh my God, look, I have already 10 people coming to my classes, but obviously it's like slowly, maybe once a semester. But it's, again, what I'm looking for with those visits. It's not only, yeah, I studied economics, or I was a political science, but we are talking about more the skills you need to succeed, the skills you need to get that first job, because may not be your dream job, but how and what is it the employers are looking for. Some of this, if you see, some of them are like younger professionals, my former students, some of them are actually managers. And so it's kind of, they can tell us, in the workplace, what they're looking for. They're really not looking for your this one project, but they're looking to hear from you. But in this project, you will working as a team. You work communicating. You can do oral presentation, or you can write a paper, like a writing report. You can do it now. So that's how kind of I approaching my classes now. And for faculty, it's kind of not that big of a lift. You're doing it. And here too, some of those people, I give them more time to my class. Some people come virtually, is like for 10, 15 minutes, but this is little things that then enhance my students, readiness for the career. And again, all of this, I just want to help students. And, I hope slowly we're getting there.
So I know that, the thing that Natalia is talking about is, and Allison and Bernard, you both said, if you keep reiterating it and we keep using the same verbiage over and over again, students are going to start to hear it, and they're going to start to remember when they heard it in all of the different roles, because critical thinking in the classroom, it definitely looks different than critical thinking, playing a sport or running an organization or, any of those other roles, student employment. Each one of these competencies holds a different, viewpoint in all of the different roles that students have within their lives, even just within family as well. So just using that awareness to talk about it with students, so that way they're hearing it over and over again. And then, like Natalia did, some light lifts in terms of how to incorporate it in verbal and written communications, I think is important. Allison, you said perfectly with, the job descriptions that you're posting for any roles that you have available, you're linking it to those competencies. When you're working in advising sessions and a student saying, oh yeah, I was doing this, and you're like, there's leadership right there. You'll forget about it sometimes that you had that role, and you're like, oh, I didn't view that as, being teamwork or being, this, that, and the other, because it looks different than working in a small group in a classroom when you think about teamwork in that way. So Natalia, I appreciate all of the work that you're doing to bring career into your classroom. So thank you very much. Natalia also did mention some support that we offer from our center, which is huge. We do have on Husky CT 2 different things to offer. One is a self-paced student-facing set of modules based off of job application materials. So we're talking about resume, cover letter, interviews, which would be great. Allison, with your behavioral interview questions, we use what's called Big Interview for that. LinkedIn, and then informational interviews. And it's something that you can have just as an option on your own Husky CT page. We can copy it directly into your courses. Just make sure that you check your notifications so you're not getting an email every single time I copy something over. Sorry about that, Ryan. And we also offer an organization for faculty and staff to use more as like a repository of assignments like Natalia has to offer. She's been kind enough to let us post there, as well as many other instructors and advisors have given us samples of what they're using in the classroom based off of, whether it's career in the classroom or competencies within the classrooms. And we've just created kind of like a repository, a library of all of these different materials to offer to you all. Natalia mentioned our career presentations and our employer alum connections. So as far as career presentations goes, a staff member from our center can come and give you a presentation on, a wealth of opportunities, whether it's job search, what can my major do, in terms of career, how do I write a resume, there's so many different things that we can, cater to or tailor to the classes that you have. Same thing with employer and alum connections. I mean, that's how I was able to secure Allison and Bernard for this call, is we have, a huge network of alum and employers that are out there that are wanting to help out students. So I know, Natalia, you have many connections just from being in the industry, but if any of you need help, getting connected with somebody, reach out to us and we can help make that happen. And then, definitely not last, and certainly not least, is collaboration on integration. So I have a background, my master's is in curriculum and instruction. And I've also, like I said, an educator for the past 12 years. So we can figure out where can career be a light lift within your role on campus, whether you're an advisor, a mentor, working one-on-one with students or in a classroom of 100 students, we can figure out how to make it work for you. This will be in the document that I sent to you after, but there are some helpful resources for those of you that aren't a career champion, but are already integrating career into your role here on campus. We encourage you to become a career champion so you can network with people like Allison, Bernard, and Natalia, to get the word out there and keep reiterating those competencies. We also have that becoming career ready, like I talked about in the beginning, and those NACE sample behaviors. But I want to leave the last 15 minutes for questions, because I know one of the questions I get a lot is, what are employers saying? And Allison and Bernard have been able to, hit the nail on the head with that one. But I do want to open up the floor to anyone on the call that has questions for our three lovely presenters today. Feel free to throw it in the chat or unmute yourselves.
I have a question.
Thanks, Nick. Go ahead.
So in terms of what employers are looking for when interviewing students, does it make a difference, or is there any kind of preference for when you're looking to hear, stories about their experiences? Is there any kind of weight to whether those experiences are particularly in the classroom, or whether it's more or less or equally important for them to have, a story about an experience as like work experience, for example? Like, does it really matter much to employers whether they're, using stories from like, I did an assignment for a class versus, I had this experience at, a part-time job or, volunteering or whatever? Or are they all kind of like equal?
Nick,
Allison, do you want to jump in?
I love that question, because we are well aware that we're meeting students at all different years in school, right? All different levels. So there are definitely, we meet students that have never had an opportunity to do an internship. There's plenty of students that have never even worked a part-time job. So when we think about meeting students on campus or, whether virtually interviewing someone, we already prepare ourselves to understand what answering a question could look like because of that, exactly what you're saying. So they're all of value. If you do have a job experience, I think it's great to share that. But if you really only have classroom experience and you were a leader in your project team, or it's really just research or whatever it is, just be able to articulate it no matter what. Like, we're open, but definitely if any experience is important to us. But if you do have internship or job, or, you're a volunteer, those are all important. But we also have to recognize not everyone, is fortunate enough to have all those experiences. So it's like being able to articulate it. And I think the one thing, being at a school like UConn, there's so many ways to gain different experiences through clubs and organizations, so many different things. So if they are like, they come to you and they're struggling, like, how can I get more experience? I think UConn itself can help give some of those experiences to students if they want them, right? Just to be able to like experience them, then tell their story. But for me, we're open to listening as long as they can articulate and connect the dots.
Great, thank you. Bernard, what are you seeing as well? Are you looking for in the classroom experience, outside the classroom experience? Does one hold more merit than the other?
Yeah, I think Allison made a good point as far as the differentiation. As we also talk to freshmen to seniors, I think we're definitely more understanding if you are a freshman or sophomore and you don't have internship, job, club experience, you can tell the story of academics in high school and, what you've done so far. I think for juniors and seniors, that's definitely where we would probably prioritize more of the job, volunteer, outside the classroom experience. But I will say above all, to also Allison's point was that storytelling part, right? It's really based on the questions. So I would say like students really have to, whatever job they're going for, whatever interview they're about to have, do their research, right, on what the company is asking for. And again, going back to storytelling and transferable skills, if you only have those school stories, those in the classroom stories, all right, then let's work with it. Let's make the story tellable in a way that answers what the job is looking for. So short answer, yes, I would prefer outside the classroom, but you can still make it work if that's all you got.
Great, thank you so much. And Nick, thank you very much for asking that question. Any follow-up?
No, thank you. That was super helpful.
Great.
Appreciate it.
So I am reading through the chat. Juliet was, very interested in that mentor part, Bernard, that you had brought up. So actually, I guess maybe it might be a little bit more for Natalia. Juliet is kind of wondering, she's curious about if there are mentors for us mentors. I know that you're a mentor yourself. Maybe you can kind of speak to that and how, I was just on a presentation with you, with your mentees, and how you see that kind of working out.
Well, I just want, my example will be on for CLS, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So our dean created this mentorship program for professors, for tenured and tenure track faculty and for in-residence faculty. So which is, I'm now mentoring the in-residence faculty group. So 22 professors signed up, and so if you would like, maybe then email me separately, and we can kind of discuss, because we want to, like, first of all, continue to do this kind of work and kind of share. The main thing there is to share, like, I'm an associate professor in residence, so to share how to get promoted and how to work with you, like all kinds of things we are covering. And so Julia, just email me separately, and so not to take time from here.
Wonderful. I also want to say, feel free to reach out to the center as well, so we can connect you with people like Allison and Bernard, to help be that advocate for what they're looking for. I mean, I've gotten a lot of messages in the chat already about how great this was, what we can do moving forward. But I think it's just also knowing what the industry is looking for within your students, so you can help tailor it, to those that are sitting in front of you. So I even look at Allison and Bernard as being mentors as well, not, in that, more, hierarchy approach to it, but just saying, like, there are people out there that are willing to work with you. We have Husky Link that has a wealth as well of alum and employers that, are hoping that they can help your students be successful as well. So one other thing in there that we were looking for is, a huge difference when talking about dressing for success. And what would your advice be when interviewing students? And it does say, are you looking for more suit and tie dress or more business casual? I do just want to kind of throw the caveat on there that when we're talking about professionalism as far as a competency, we're not looking at, what they're wearing to the interview. We're looking for more of that storytelling approach and showing in terms of professionalism that you can take initiative, you're adaptable and flexible to the environment that you're working on, and you're dependable and making the most out of your role within an organization. So I'm not sure if Allison or Bernard, if you wanted to answer the question of what would your advice be when interviewing students?
For dressing, I will still say, I feel like what I've heard recently is, even though we're, still doing virtual interview for the job that you don't have, like, what if you have a jacket, throw it on, or, just looking, especially from the top up, professional. Everyone has a different work code, dress code once they're hired, right? So if it's a business casual environment, let them tell you that and come to work that way when you get the job. But recently I did have a team of people that were talking about it and saying, professionally, take it serious. You don't have a job yet. Just you're interviewing, and, dress for the job, and then let the dress code be told to you once you're hired?
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting question, especially for me, just being of a younger generation that's moving away from the kind of suit and tie. I think it depends on the job first and foremost. Like, if do your research as always, right? If you're looking at a job like a more business, seems to me more suit and tie, right? And I think teaching as a profession is a little more casual. But at the same time, I do think you, like Allison mentioned, right, just for the job you want. My advice would probably be start high, right? Start very formal if you're unsure, and then get the job and see what happens. And if the dress code is looking a little more casual, then you can move down. But it's harder when you make that first impression and you're not, you haven't dressed for success, to like change that impression. So I always say start high, and then if it changes, it changes.
I'm going to throw something out.
Okay, go ahead, Allison, go.
I just wanted to say real quick, going to the word communication, if you don't know and you have a recruiter connection to the company, hey, students, ask a question. Just that, it's okay. I had somebody the other day email me, I'm going to my final round interview. Should I be putting on a suit yet? Like, literally ask that question. So it is okay to ask that question, especially to somebody that's helping to set up the interview, or your recruiter, or ask it if you don't know. Then communicate, ask your questions. Sorry, Natalia.
Well, I just wanted to say, from the standpoint of faculty, especially in the pandemic, I start seeing, because we were just on, on Zoom, and then you record, like assignment would be record your presentation, and I see them with like in their bedrooms, like not bed is not made, like closet open or something. So this is now I start telling them, like in terms of their professionalism. Okay, so make sure you're facing like the wall. There is nothing there. Like make your bed at least. I don't know, not be in bed. So this, like you're laughing, but like that's what I started receiving this video. Like content is fine, but what are they thinking? So now, especially with the first rounds of interviews, it seems to me be online on these Zooms. So that's one of the important things to tell our students, that, okay, at least dress to success up here, whatever Allison said, put a screen behind you. Like, so this is first thing, and you cannot undo it, as Bernard completely said. You cannot undo it. Just do your first impression very well, and then communicate and see what's going on. But this is for some of their backgrounds. It's just, they're kids,
All right. Well, thank you very much for all of that. I think, all of this advice has, it has many different ways that it can go in terms of the roles that our audience has. So I want to thank both Allison, Bernard, and Natalia for being a part of this today. And if anybody has any further questions, feel free to stay on the call. So again, we just wanted to thank you from the Center for Career Development for being with us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at career@uconn.edu.
Question. How are you? Hi, Natalia. We got to meet briefly at the most recent career fair in Stanford.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. So I'm there with Oscar Harmon in economics, recruiting students, and so much of this comes up. And I started this position in October of 21 and have learned a little bit more about what my role is as the PhD assistant and for the MSQE students. And I've sat on a lot of the alumni panels that Oscar has hosted. And so many of these questions do come up. The students are so nervous about interviewing. They always think like, what do they ask you? What do they ask you? And they just want to know what the questions are so they can be prepared with an answer. In this approach, saying, if you are, and tying it into your curriculum is just such a perfect thing, because that marries the two. It's like, here are the things, and here's how you demonstrate them. I think that will help students relax into knowing like, yes, these are achievable things. This is not some mysterious it factor that people are looking for. These are things that can be demonstrated and quantified. In quantitative economics, it makes a lot of sense. One thing they always bring up is, how do I answer a question if I don't know the answer? Like if there's a problem that's presented to me. And the advice that the alumni say is, well, they want to see what your approach would be, not the answer. They're not looking for the answer. They want to see how your brain works and what kind of a teammate you would be. Because you're going to be working with a team most of the time and have a boss. Like, are you someone who's going to be like, I know the answer, this is the only approach? Or would you say, well, here's what I would bring to the table, but I also need to know these things. So like, I would reach out to this department, that kind of thing. What advice do you have on that? Like, how would they demonstrate their research or demonstrate their use of technology? I'll stop talking so somebody could get a word in edgewise. But maybe you have some advice for that.
Lisa, I think that's a great question. And it's funny you mentioned the earlier part, right? They want to know the question so they can come with an answer. I find myself having to give the little interview skills, like aside from Teach for America, such as like, it's okay to not know an answer, right? But it's also okay like to stop and pause, right? I always say, I would love to see a student go, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. Right, like that is so thoughtful, and it almost looks natural than you giving me a scripted answer that you had ready. So I would say to students, feel free to take the thoughtful pause. And then like you mentioned, right? Like if you don't know the answer, I think it's much more impressive when a student admits that, right? Like, hey, I might not be sure of how to do that, but here's what I would do. Right? Or I would talk to this person, or I would work with this person to do that. So I think the humility of not trying to come up with an answer all the time and not trying to have the answer, it could really work in their favor instead.
Thank you. I think that's such great advice. And our students who tend to get very fixated on the results, I think that's such an important thing for them to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think the technical question, so one, you kind of started off with asking, sometimes they call those case questions. So again, how can you think through solving it? That's 100%, a question some companies ask. They want to hear how you're going to think to solve the problem. You don't have to know the answer. And again, going back to being in the classroom last week at UConn, I said that so many times. It is okay to take a minute. You don't have to quickly go like, take a breath, think. It's okay, and then go with it. Just like Bernard said, it's okay. Like, let me think about it. I'll just say for technical questions, I recruit for kind of a technical analytical position, and we want to hear how they're going to walk through and solve a problem or how they have. So it also, if you can walk through it and explain, you don't have to get down to the nuts and bolts of like you making what kind of equation in Excel at all, because over my head, but how you solved a problem and what technologies did you use, who was a part of it, how did you articulate the roles of the group of everyone, like how did you then take the solution you came up with and who did you present it to, how did you put it together to present it to everyone that it was clear. Also, if they're, who are they speaking to? Are they speaking to a data scientist? Are they speaking to the recruiter? Because if you're speaking to the recruiter or somebody that's not technical, I still am looking. If you can explain something that is technical to someone like me that's not, and I still get how you went from point A to the end and shared your results. When you're talking to that data scientist for the data scientist entry-level job, they're going to get a little into the weeds, and they're probably going to ask you some more technical related questions to that technical question, right? They're going to ask a little bit more. So I think it's really being able to articulate it and then think about the audience. And that's what I want to hear. Like sometimes I want to hear, I got this database, a SAS database or info from SAS, and then we put it into Tableau, but this is why it was important. This is why I got this data. This is how much time I spent looking through it. These are the people that I had to reach out to, these business partners or my teammates. And then I have this solution, and I ran it by my professor or my manager. And then, in the end, this is the result I got. And then what was the big picture of the result? Why is that important? So that's helpful, but that's a great question. We had students bring that up last week too, because it's the case of the technical question and how do we answer it.
That's great. Thank you so much. This was super, super duper. The reminder popped up and I was like, oh, it's time already. And I'm so glad that this worked out. This was really practice. Students saying it out loud, talking to themselves in a mirror,
a friend that they can trust, that they can giggle alongside with. I mean, because it gets silly sometimes, right, as you're talking, but somebody can be serious with. Practicing your answers is key. Just be comfortable with what you're saying.
Yeah, we do.
You don't have to.
Graduate research presentation forms. They have to do this every semester in their 6th to 9th semester. And some of them, exactly like Natalia said, like, where are you? What are you doing? And who are you talking to? And it gets very technical. And I guess when you're talking to your peers, it can go to technical, but the soft skills are not. They don't come out. They get confused, they ramble, they cut off, and lots of room for improvement there with balancing like you said, the technology skills, which they are very competent with those softer skills.
Yeah.
This was great. Thank you. Thank you so much.